Hey everybody, Tom Barnes. This is Stories from the 78, and this is beyond the Chicago 78 neighborhoods because I think it's international because I have Samuel West here who you started the Museum of Failure, right?
That's correct. Back in 2017, I started Museum of Failure in a small little town in southern Sweden.
Right. So that's the international flavor. I mean, I could tell by your accent, you might not have grown up a lot or been to the States a lot. You have an accent from overseas, but either way, you are American and Scandinavian, like you said. But your Museum of Failure is worldwide, right? Because failure
Absolutely.
happens all over the world.
Yeah, failure doesn't respect national sort of international borders. Um, most of the items in the museum are though, because a lot of them, one of the criteria is that it has to be an innovation. So it can't just be, failure, you screwed up on something or a mistake. It has to be where the inventor, the person, the company was trying to push things like forward, like push the boundaries a bit and
Mm-hmm.
try new things. So it's very innovation heavy. And I mean, the United States, Western Europe, but definitely the United States is by far the most innovative country when it comes to consumer products, at least. And
Oh,
so
sure.
there's a lot of things from the States.
Yeah, we like to make things just for people to buy them and dispose of them instantly. I feel like here in the
That
States.
is correct. But
I was
sadly, the rest of the world also likes that now. So thanks a lot, America.
Yeah, that's why our waistlines are fat, and we're always working all the time and trying to
Yep,
figure out
yep,
something else new.
yep.
Looking on the site, and I forgive me for not saying this earlier, but the museum has a temporary location right now in Brooklyn, correct? And it
Yep.
opened March 17th.
Yeah, and it'll be open until mid-June in Brooklyn.
So it'll be there for a little while, but that's what happens. It comes for a temporary stay in a
Yeah,
city, and then it moves on to the next one.
exactly. So after Brooklyn, it's not decided yet, but it's going to be one of the larger US cities, whether it's Chicago or San Francisco, or Seattle. I don't know yet, but it'll be one of the bigger cities. We were already in Los Angeles 2018. So been there, done that. So it has to be someplace else.
So what inspired you to start this museum? Because I mean, there's a lot of things that museums could be, but I mean,
Yeah.
one of failure. I imagine people at first were like, "What?" But it totally makes sense because if we didn't have all this failure in the world, there wouldn't be all the success in the world either.
Absolutely right. I mean, the reason I started the museum was because I wanted to convey how important it is. So my background is as a psychologist and an innovation consultant and researcher. So one of my sort of one of the jobs or sort of problems that I was dealing with my clients was that these companies were all cool. They want to be innovative. They want to, try new things, etc. But the individuals, the people are afraid of, failure, and no
Hmm.
amounts of, books or consultants is going to help that. So I thought it would be fun. It would be interesting to use the museum format to try to convey that, hey, we really need to start destigmatizing failure. We have to start appreciating the role of failure in all type of progress. So that was the sort of beginning of it, and it's
Interesting. Yeah,
fun. It's fun too.
yeah, absolutely. It's always fun, and I think anybody who's had a job where they're, not in their 20s, let's say, but after their 20s, have failed to get to the job that they're at or failed to get to, buy the house or apartment or car. There's all these failures that equal success. And I think you're right. Like we as a society, at least here in the States, failure was something frowned upon, but you only like you read anybody who's a successful entrepreneur or leader of a company, they talk about failure all the time and sometimes they're failing as they're being successful at the same time. I mean, I think Apple is a good example of that. They put out products where all of a sudden it disappears and you haven't heard about it again. You're like, oh, what happened to that version of that thing? Yeah, it's just gone. But and that leads me to some of the things I remember growing up as a kid. I thought Crystal Pepsi was the coolest thing in the world. I was on a road trip with my family. We were driving through like Colorado and we were at a
Yeah.
7-Eleven, and then there's Crystal Pepsi, and I had begged my parents to buy it because I didn't see it. I grew up in Chicago, didn't see it. So I brought it home with us. Like I made my parents drive it 1,000 miles across in a minivan. And and I went to school at junior high, and I go like, and you see this Crystal Pepsi. I was the coolest kid in the world. It didn't matter that it tasted weird. I didn't care. It was awesome. But those are some of the things in the museum.
I mean, the Crystal Pepsi is in the museum for sure. It's a classic '90s failure. But you actually remember, but didn't even care what it tasted like. I mean, it was just like it's such a cool new thing, and you're a kid, so you're like, hey, it's a watercolored or transparent
Pepsi.
cola. Like it was just a fun thing. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if I think hard enough, I remember it being like kind of citrusy, but not over. Like it was almost like a bland
Yeah.
Sprite. It was
What
kind of
made
like that.
I mean, well, I mean, it does have a cola flavor. I opened one, and we had three bottles at the museum. So we actually there was some high profile journalists there, and we're like, all right, let's open one of these, you know. And it's actually okay now they're old, but I mean the it tastes like a bad quality cola. You know, you buy a cola off-brand cola that's just really cheap.
Like a
That's
Shasta.
what,
No
yeah, but
offense to
Shasta, no offense, Shasta, but shit
Right.
cola.
Exactly. Yeah, I
um,
mean, but that's what
and
it was.
yeah, and the vice president at the time of Pepsi actually made a statement, whether several years later, saying, "Yeah, well, it was a really cool product, but we should have spent more time and made more effort trying to make it taste good."
Yeah, I mean, Pepsi had a couple of faults in the 90s. I mean, another failed thing was the jet that they were supposed to give away that some
Yeah,
kid
what
like
what
sued
was
them for.
that was stupid. Um, well, there's another. I remember. So now we're getting we jumped in off into the drinks section, but I remember in 2008. I remember I was in France at the time, and Coca-Cola launched a product called Coca-Cola Black.
Oh, I remember that.
It's a black with two dots over it, like so Coca-Cola Black. I guess I don't know how you say it.
What was it
Um,
supposed to be?
well, the idea was this makes perfect sense. So Coca-Cola was like, "Hey, people like cola, and they're like, and people like coffee." And there was a huge, surge both in the States and outside of the
Oh yeah, it's like when
people are
Starbucks
drinking
took
more.
off.
Yeah. There are people drinking more coffee. Like, people like coffee, people like Coke. Genius. Let's mix
Uh-huh.
the two. So Coke mixed with coffee, a Diet Coke mixed with coffee, and then you have Coca-Cola Black. I just remember because the bottle was really cool, and it felt exclusive and everything. And I remember so clear. I bought it, and I was like at the hotel room, I'm not going to exaggerate. I was super excited, but I was excited about trying it,
Sure.
and I just remember pouring it down the drain. I was like, it's horrible. It's absolutely horrible.
Yeah, there's been a few things I remember. Even like Jack and Coke was sold together as one. Remember that? Like I was like right after college. That was
Yeah,
all those mixed drinks became a
yeah.
thing. But
There's one actually. Now we're talking about it. We don't have to we don't have to get stuck here, but
that's okay.
there's we had the Museum of Failure in Canada last time,
Hmm.
last show, and we tried to find some Canadian failures, and one of those was Seagram, the whiskey brand.
Yeah.
Yeah, they
Oh
were
yeah,
huge.
Seagram and Seven.
Seagram was a massive Canadian company.
Yeah.
Anyway, they had some problems with uh, changing the generational change of leadership and stuff, and the company went to hell. But before that happened, they also had this idea like, hey, people like whiskey and people like beer. Let's make
Oh
a
no.
beer flavored whiskey. It went as badly as you probably think it.
Oh, that sounds like what you taste in your mouth the night after drinking
Yeah, it sounds
when you're
horrible.
wishing your life to hell at that point, right?
Yeah.
That sounds like a hangover in a bottle. So how many different exhibits are there at the museum, and like what kind of categories are there? We've covered the drinks. I know Coke 2
Yeah,
was another one that was a big
yeah.
one that I also thought was super cool, but what other things were there?
I mean, I really try to get a huge variety as much as possible, so it won't just be smartphones, because we could probably fill an entire museum with
Sure.
failed smartphones. But there's food stuff, there's technology. We've got a car in there, and some other vehicles. We have medical mishaps, digital disasters. Uh, we have one section called "The Future Is Not Now." When like
It's like the
when
Tomorrowland at Epcot and Disney.
exactly. Whereas, like, yeah, you had this idea of a vision of the future. You made it. The company makes this product, and it's no, 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 no. That's not working. Your idea of the future is wrong. We have an adult section with a sex doll and some sex toys as well.
Oh, fantastic.
That's a interesting one as well.
Is
You
there
want to hear?
a,
You want to hear about the sex doll?
let's hear about this. Was it sex doll have a name?
The name is Shared Girlfriend.
Oh, sure. Common spelling, I'm
So
sure.
yeah, so this particular one is from a Chinese company that donated it to us, also pre-COVID. So you're familiar with the shared economy, like Airbnb doesn't actually own apartments, they just rent them out.
Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah. And Uber doesn't actually own the taxis, they just rent it out, right?
Yeah,
You
absolutely.
share the car with other users, right?
Oh
Oh
no.
yes, this is where we're
Oh
going.
no.
So you would on the app, you could choose Miss Russia, Miss Africa, Miss Asia, Miss something else, and there was no Miss America, but there was Wonder Woman.
Oh, well, that
Um,
makes sense.
Makes sense. So you would, on your app, you would just, for I think it was like $40. So the idea is that a sex doll costs like $3,000 or more. They're super expensive, and
Okay.
most men can't afford that kind of a price tag for a sex doll. So you can just rent the doll per day. So you make your selection, and then she's delivered on the back of a scooter.
Come on.
Yeah. And then you get to enjoy her company for 24 hours, and then they come and
Hey,
pick her
Bob.
up.
Hey, Fran. This is just my sex doll that arrived on a scooter. I'm going to be
Ignore
busy all
her for
night.
a while.
I'm sure it's
Uh,
not discreet at all.
and yeah, so, and apparently she was she was sanitized in between users.
Well, I would hope so. Good Lord. But even still, it's almost cheaper to get a hooker at that point if you have it for a couple of days.
I don't know, 24 hours.
True. Very true. Not that I've had a hooker, not that I know much, but just from what I've seen in movies is what I'm going with. That's all. So I would imagine that's probably one of the more interesting ones that you have there. But why did that fail? For obvious reasons?
Yeah, no, well, I mean, I'm not quite, the company itself said that they were shut down by the government, the Beijing, the Communist Party, who thought it was inappropriate. They had their yearly event at the same time they launched. They're like, we don't want this kind of stuff in the news at the same time as our Congress. That was one official reason. The other reasons are, of course, like, is it a good idea or not?
Oh my gosh. Wow, that's fantastic. So is there one that stands out to you that is like, how did this fail? Like this shouldn't have failed. I mean, besides the
There's
sex doll, of course.
Yeah, there's quite a few that are just that products that they could have made it. They could have been really awesome. I mean, yeah, I mean, I can't. I don't know if this is like the best example, but there's like technology-wise, Apple, for example, with their gaming console that nobody knows about, Apple Pippin, was like
Oh, I
super
didn't know
good.
about that.
No, nobody knows about it. It was like super good graphics. Basically over-engineered and top of the line. but it was more expensive than the other consoles at the same time, which means
When
that
did this come
nobody
out?
in 96.
Oh, so
So
PlayStation was already out by
yeah, yeah,
then,
yeah,
and
yeah.
but yeah,
So
leave it to
they,
Apple to be the most expensive in the game, right?
yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah. Well, I guess they have a history of that, but I
Yeah,
mean, it's one of those things like, guys, you could have gotten it right if if you weren't so arrogant and had such hubris that people were going to pay, 100% more for a console that's really good, but it's also good to just have basic graphics because I can afford it.
right. You kind
Um,
of wonder if they are actually going to try to do that again, just to keep it innovating as a company. Because I'm surprised there's not Apple Cars right at this point, right?
you remember a few years ago there was a lot of talk about Apple cars.
I
There was a
do,
lot of
yeah. Then Tesla
yeah
came on, and then that was it.
yeah, and then there was reports that from in the tech sector saying that there were sort of rumors or reports stating that Apple was hiring all the sort of autonomous vehicle engineers they could sort of attract to Apple, and they were like hiring anybody that had ever worked with electric vehicles, and there was like high expectations. And what happens? Nothing.
Yeah, well, I feel like that's a lot of the innovative world where you do a lot to get a little, but the
Yeah.
one time you make it, then you have the iPhone, right?
Yeah, yeah. Everybody's chasing that unicorn.
Yeah. So wrapping up here, I was just curious, we talked about a lot of different things here, but what's the one where it just makes you laugh, where you're just like, seriously?
Well, I there's one that gets a lot of attention. It's so silly, but it's funny. It's called the Euro Club. So
The Euro Club.
I'm not a golfer, but I have played golf a few times, and you're walking around on the grass on the field there, and as a male, you're like, I need to urinate, but there's no discreet place to do so, right? So
Uh-huh.
this golf club is it's actually got it's got a canister. It's a thing to urinate into discreetly.
Fantastic.
Yeah, yeah,
Just
discreetly. It has a little towel that comes with it. You clip onto your belt, and then you can fiddle around under the towel, urinate into this fake golf club, screw the lid back on, and
wait,
then
but you're still on a golf course in the middle of nowhere. So you what?
yeah,
You're
well,
off on the
that's
corner.
you
It probably looks worse with
well,
the towel over you.
there's a beautiful YouTube. If you look for the infomercial or the commercial for the Euro Club, it's beautiful because it's like if you're playing golf and you're playing golf with lady golfers, then you need to use the privacy towel, so to not offend the
Oh,
lady golfers.
right. Not to mention, if you don't clean that thing every time you use it, then there's stuff on it. Good times. Well, hey, I get the intent, right? That's the most
Hey,
important
it's a
thing.
good. There's nothing wrong with the idea, and I don't know. I mean, it both makes sense and not, but yeah, the advertisements were kind of funny for that, which didn't help the product a lot.
Yeah, it sounds like we could do this forever. I mean, this sounds like such a wonderful thing to kind
Yeah,
of
well,
walk
we've got
through.
like 200 items, so yeah, we could go on for days.
200 items. So I imagine it'd take you a couple hours if you really wanted to absorb the entire experience walking through at the very least, right?
Yeah, I mean, if anybody makes it to New York, definitely go over to Brooklyn and check it out. I would give it about an hour, or budget an hour and a half for it. Most people are stay about an hour. If you read all the signs, most people are lazy; they don't read all the signs. But if you're interested in it, then you'll read the gallery, the signs, and it'll take about an hour and a half.
And the website for people, I imagine buying tickets ahead of time is a good idea. So I'm guessing the website, it would be a good spot for that.
Yeah, yeah, you can buy tickets at the door. I'm not sure if they're more I don't actually know what the deal is there, but you can buy them online if you go to museumoffailure.com. And yeah, it's open until mid-June. And this place in Brooklyn, where it is, it's kind of a cool sort of industrial. It's called Industry City, and they've got you know, they've got some cool pubs and bar. There's a sake brewery next door,
Oh, cool.
which I thought was amazing. But you know,
Sounds very Brooklyn.
It's a place. Yeah, it's very hipster, very hipster.
Yeah. Well, Samuel, it's been an absolute pleasure talking with you. I appreciate you taking time to talk with me, and hopefully this museum we can meet in person where it comes to Chicago, because we have our fair amount of interesting and odd museums here, like the Museum of Medieval Torture, for example.
That's brilliant.
Oh, it's a good time, my friend.
I need to ask your listeners for a favor.
Yeah.
So we're definitely coming to Chicago. I don't know when, but I would love to have some suggestions for of failures that are Chicago fuck ups and failures.
Oh, I'm sure I can think of a couple.
Yeah, so ask you and your listener, send me an email. Say, hey, you want a Chicago fuck ups? Here's a few.
I have one off the top of my head.
Yeah.
I know they're gonna hate me for saying this, but I think I don't know if you heard of Portillo's. It's a hot dog place.
No.
So it's a hot dog place that's now like was bought out, and now they are like publicly traded, but it started in Chicago.
Oh, so big.
And it's hot dogs, beef have you had an Italian beef sandwich? Like a Chicago? No, yeah, it's a Chicago thing. But they came out with this it's jardiniere. So jardiniere is like stuff you would put on, people put on anything, pizza, beef sandwiches. They came up with a jardiniere sauce. So I don't know if that one has took off or not. I haven't seen, like, it was like, check this out, it's wonderful. Shh, don't talk about it ever again. It's been kind of one of those.
If anybody has one of those at home,
I have one in my fridge.
Oh, come on, man. Okay, you can, don't throw it away.
No, I'll keep it just for that reason. I should have grabbed it right now. But yeah, it's
awesome.
One of those things. So I don't know though. It could just be me, but I haven't heard anybody talk about it since. So we will do that. Where should they send this? Just go to the Museum of Failure website?
info@museumoffailure.com.
Fantastic. Samuel, thank you so much for taking time. I appreciate talking to you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.